What's up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of Final Cut Pro Help Live. This is the last stream that we're going to do covering the 2020 shortcut of the year because all the votes have been tallied up, and we do have a new shortcut of the year. Last year's 2019 shortcut of the year was Command B. Command B, of course, did make it into the finals this year, but Spacebar beat out Command B with number of votes, so it is the new shortcut of the year to play and pause content, which if you are not using Spacebar at all in your workflow, you definitely should. Someone did mention using the J, K, and L keys to control playback, and a lot of times you'll use those instead of the Spacebar. I 100% agree with that using J, K, and L to navigate around a timeline is extremely useful. J to rewind. Each time you press J, it speeds up. You can press K to pause, and then press the L key to play back your footage. And then again, just like J, the more times you press L, you'll speed through your footage there. But I will say, when I'm using J, K, and L, it's usually with my right hand. And my thumb on my right hand is almost always right over the space bar in addition to J, K, and L. So a lot of times when I'm going through and using these keys, I'm also mixing in the space bar for play and pause. And the space bar is just an extremely valuable piece of hardware there. And it's your biggest key on the keyboard for a reason. It's one that we use all the time and could not do our video editing here without it. But of course, the runner-up Command B to cut various places on a clip is useful as well to trim things. So go ahead and congratulate the spacebar for winning the 2020 shortcut of the year. We'll go ahead and do this next year as well, and probably switch it up. See how we get the voting going. We'll switch up some things, make it a little bit funner there for the various shortcuts. So I did get some questions coming over on the Instagram stream just now that I want to answer, but I also have a few questions come over the past couple hours from a couple people. But the one question I do want to cover is related to titles, and specifically if you have plugins, you may have gotten some various titles and different things. There's an auto tracker that you can get from a company, and there's some various things, but they come in as these title clips, which are just the purple lines that run across the top of your clips there, and it's connected down to whatever clip you have there on the storyline, on the primary storyline. And if you want to add a transition to your title clips, you can do that. So don't be afraid to add transitions to titles. And if I play back this clip, you'll see that this title, where all I did is what Final Cut Pro questions do you have, that title just pops onto the screen, right? There's no transition at all. It just pops on and then leaves. You can click on the title and go into the inspector, Command 4 there to bring up the inspector. And sometimes in the inspector, depending on the plugin and it could be a third-party thing, you may have some controls up at the top in your inspector that you can go in and enable or disable a transition. But many of these plugins don't go the extra mile to build in transitions, because if they put in a dissolve, chances are you're going to want to wipe or you're going to want something else. So there's so many transitions that for the most part, I don't see plugins building those in. And that's okay, because you can go right into our transition browser, which is here on the timeline, or Control Command 5 to bring up the transition browser. And let me zoom down into it here. Many of these transitions are built into Final Cut. I do have a couple categories of third-party things. But you can use these built-in titles or get a plugin to apply any transition you want. Go ahead and take a look at them. But the ones that are built in here work pretty well for the majority of cases. And if you look at the preview window here, you can scrub across it or skim across it here. And when you're skimming across it, you see it's transitioning from the orange clip to the blue clip, and you get a little preview of it. You're not stuck with what it shows in the preview. In this case, on this pretty standard wipe here, it's wiping from the left to the right, but you can change that. There's options to customize it. But the whole point of this is to show how you can put transitions onto titles. So just click and drag that transition onto the title itself. Notice it kind of has a white outline around the title when you're above it. And if you let go, it'll add that transition to the title. So now if I play back the project here, you'll see that very quickly, the text now wipes onto the screen from left to right. Okay, and you can click and drag on a transition just like you would any other transition that you put onto a clip to extend the length of it if you want it to be a longer transition coming onto the screen. And if you want to customize it even further from where it is right now, just select that transition, go into the inspector. You can see it's the transition inspector here, and we get options to switch it around. So if I wanted to, I can go in and change the angle of it where it's wiping onto the screen. I can change the direction here, left, right, up, down, and you get some other options, like in this case, the edge, maybe how solid of a line it is, or if we actually want it more of a kind of a soft wipe that's coming onto the screen. Okay, so that's how you add a transition to any title clip that you've put on there. And this works with all the plugins as well. So if I do Command 0 to reset the interface here, at the top left corner, we can go into our titles and generators sidebar. And any of your titles that are here, any generators that show up, when you connect those to another clip, you can go ahead and put transitions on them. And even if the title itself doesn't have an option built into it, you're now overriding that title by using your own transitions. So I did get that question that comes in. Hopefully that provides an answer and the way to do that. The one thing I did get that would probably be in response to it just from the video is like this. Notice I have 3 lines of text. And then Final Cut Pro questions, and then do you have 3 lines of text? If I wanted each of those lines to transition separately, I would have to go in and create 3 separate title clips. And I can show you how to do that really quickly here. I'm actually going to make the clip height a little bit shorter, and then I'm just going to hold Option and drag my title clip up to duplicate it, and then do it one more time because I have 3 lines of text. And now I can go into each of these and delete the various lines of text. So the first one is going to say just what. The second one will have my second line of text. And I'm in the inspector here. I'm just deleting those additional lines of text. So each one of them is now its own track. You can see they're getting stacked here. So I can rearrange these so that they're not stacked. But now I can go into my transition browser, drag over a wipe onto the second title and the third title, and then I might stagger these a little bit so that the first one doesn't happen at the same time as the other one, right? So I'll stack there, and if I play it back, we'll see what that looks like. And you can see how the various titles that are transitioning onto the screen, obviously they're not all in sync with the various angles and directions and everything, but that's how you would get more control of your text and your titles that are there. Okay, so that was the kind of the question I got, I think it was a couple hours ago. Let me take a look at the stream here. I did see a couple other ones come through. Again, if you do have the questions, hit that little question box at the bottom. That's the easiest way for me to see what's coming through here. But I do see here one that is, what's the best way to brighten a video without it adding noise? That's a good question. So, in most cases, if you have a darker clip, something was edited at night or shot at night, for example, I have this fireworks clip here, right? Most of it is black because it was nighttime when this was going off. If I add this down to the timeline, you can only adjust what's in your clip, like the data that's there. So if you're shooting at night, dark areas where there's not a lot of light gives your camera and your footage less data to be able to brighten things up without getting noise. Okay, so that's just part of the game, is you're gonna get noise when you go into it to brighten things up. With that said, if we select the clip and go into the color inspector, usually when I do this, I like to show my video scopes. So Command 7 to show the video scopes, or go up to the view menu. I'll go in and hide usually the browser so I get a little bit more space here. And make sure that you're viewing it just like I am one. I usually just bring the one scope up. And then at the bottom here, I might make this a little bit brighter if it's harder to see. This just makes the lines brighter here. But then we're also viewing the waveform under this little button. So this shows me my light and dark colors and where they're at. You can see these lighter areas of the firework here is almost 100, if not 100. It was too bright for the camera to capture it. And then the dark areas are almost as black as they get. They're right around that 0 line. So in my color inspector here, I'll go in and usually add a color board for this. I find is the easiest way. You can certainly do this with the color wheels as well. But under the exposure tab, this is where you get your blacks on the left, whites on the right here, and you are changing essentially the bottom of your colors here. This changes the really dark end of the scale, so all those really dark colors, which I don't have to go down too much. They're pretty much all at the bottom and solid black there. And then the right side is our lighter areas, which if I go up, I'm now very overexposed with the fireworks. So if anything, I'm not even going to change the highlights there. Those brighter spots are pretty good. But as far as lightening up your footage without it adding noise, that you're going to want to play with this middle one. This changes your midtones and makes kind of the middle area brighter or darker here. And I'm going to make this a drastic change here just so you can see all of this that's over here is all noise. This really should be almost pure black there as opposed to all this grain that we're seeing when you crank it way up. But there's no data in this footage to brighten it up without it adding that noise. So real answer is go back and shoot this better so that you don't get all this noise in here, or you're kind of living with the noise that's there. Now, if it's subtle, if you didn't brighten it up that much, if it's more subtle, you can go into your effects browser, and there's some tools as far as your light is concerned, as far as the kind of grain that we put in there. There's tools in here that you can go in and use to denoise it and remove some of that noise that it's adding in. So you can play with that as well. One that I like to use a lot is Sharpen. In this case, it's not going to do anything. We've blasted it up way too high here. But there is Sharpen, and there's also a denoise option that you can go in to help with that, to kind of remove some of your noise that you're putting in. But a lot of these changes that you're making to the colors, when you're bringing up and brightening it up, you're just going to have to deal with that noise that it's put in. You can certainly go in and start masking this. So if you're brightening up certain areas, you can mask that color change that you've done so that it doesn't brighten up everything and add noise to the entire project, which can be a problem. So don't forget that you have that tool as well at your disposal. So yeah, I hope that helps. Obviously, it's not a great answer because when you are messing around with footage and brightening it up a lot, you do run into those issues. I will say there are some pretty good tools on the market that are denoisers you can use from various third parties. And when you use those, sometimes they can remove a lot of that noise and help out with it. There's this built-in one that's a noise reduction option. If you put that on, it might take a while for it to render and process your footage, but that can help as well. It's just called noise reduction. But this one you can see very few options, but let me show you before. We have all this noise, very color pixelated and just very distorted. But if we did reduce noise, it goes and processes it and smooths a lot of that out. So you can use that. I usually use that as a last resort if I'm trying to get rid of some stuff and I need to use that shot. You can go in and do that. If we go and bring up the maximum, for example, again, it takes a bit to render. If you have a slower machine, this might take a while. But yeah, that goes and smooths it out. Now I can go back to my color board here and reduce that middle area here for the midtones. And maybe I'm only brightening it up a little bit. When I do that and it goes through and processes that noise reduction, we'll see what it looks like here, but it's going to be smoother because we're not blasting the highlights as much. But that is, a change here from what it looked like before. So that is, this is the after that you're seeing. And if I uncheck the noise reduction, you can see the difference there. So, that's one option. You have noise reduction built in. I find that there are definitely some third-party tools out there that can help a lot more than what's built in. But best thing to do is just not use that footage because that's hard to get around. All right, let me see what other questions came through on the chat. Again, if you do have them, go ahead and hit that little question box. You can type anything you want to see in there. This is one that I had earlier. What effects would you recommend on an indoor sports car shoot? So effects, these are things that are personal to you. So when you go into the effects browser, if you're not really sure what effects you're trying to apply, meaning like what kind of look you're trying to accomplish, I recommend going out and watching other content that's out there. Almost everything's already been done, and you can then mix and match things that you've seen to create your own look. So go out and look at some things and try to get some examples. You can do that also built into Final Cut because you have these color presets and comic looks and various things built in that will allow you to see footage as it's been processed through some Final Cut stuff. So these color presets are a really great starting point because these are color corrections that essentially have been applied to a clip, and there are various ways of kind of customizing it. So let me go to another clip here. Let's actually bring up this ambulance. It's outdoors, but you'll get the idea here. As you scrub across or skim across these color presets, notice how different this clip looks with all the various color presets, right? Affecting the color is one type of effect that can have an extreme impact on the way that your video is processed and viewed and interpreted, kind of how you make your audience feel. Just by adjusting the color is huge, right? We have an option here in the dim, almost looks like it's at night, getting down to there with the shadows that it's brought up, versus something like this one with frost, where it's trying to get more of that ice look to it. So just by looking at this, you can get some general ideas of where you want to pursue and what you want to do. With a color preset, the nice thing about it is you can just apply it to your clip, and then you can go in onto the color board that it added, just hit that little color icon, and this is the actual change it made, in this case to the exposure. If we go to saturation, we can see where it changed it, and then same thing with the color. We can see what options it changed to the color to make this look happen. All right, so now that you have a starting point, go into these color presets, you can adjust them, maybe a little bit more dramatic, change what's in here, and you now have the control of it. So if you don't know where to start, presets are a good place to start. The other one is looks. Looks are pretty well built and finished looks or effects, and you can do the same thing with each of these. So let me remove the color board here, and looking at our looks, this is the original clip, and if you just scrub across the look, we see something similar to what we saw with the color presets, only this time these looks may be adding multiple effects. For example, night vision has a color and some masking applied to it, so you can get multiple things from here and get an idea of what that looks like. These work the same way. So this is the X-ray one. I'll drag that on. Notice in my effects here, there's that effect, and I can see I have an amount slider with it to be able to change where that one's at. All right. Almost all of these, the color presets are just in the color room. That's what that one is. These color looks, these ones you can right click on and open in motion, and you can see what they've customized in Motion itself. If you don't know, Motion is a $49 app here in the US that allows you to create effects, and you can create titles, and all of these effects that give this option to open a copy in Motion, they were created using the Motion app, and that allows you to go tenfold beyond what is just built into Final Cut as far as both the way the look is and for customizing it. So just again, is the X-ray look that's here. If I did it with that one, right click, say open a copy in Motion. As long as you have Motion installed on your Mac, it's going to go and open that app, and we'll be able to break it apart to see what it was done with it. So that's the other part of it, is if you kind of reach the limits of what Final Cut can do, and you want to customize it a little bit further. In this case with the look, we only had that one slider. If you want to go further, then it's time to go up here into Motion And if you don't know Motion, you can start learning it by breaking apart the looks that are built in. So again, in this case, just a 101 tutorial of Motion here. On the left column, we have our layers. And so these are the layers that were applied to this effect. So we get the effect source. You can see there's a clone layer to add a blur to it. It's making it negative. That's what inverts that color. There's a contrast change, and then there's the gamma effect that's been applied to it. All of these ones are the various effects that have been combined together to create that X-ray look that was inside of Final Cut. So here inside of Motion, you can select any of these, go into the inspector, and customize it even further. You're just digging apart this effect to create your own. So that's as far as specific to an indoor car shoot, that can be things where you use masks to mask around the car and put various effects on specific areas, but it's all the same as far as your sports cars and working with anything. Is when it comes to editing, it's all just video that's on the screen, and you're mixing various effects together to create an actual look or create some other effect that you want to apply and put onto the screen. So let's get down to the bottom here. I think I got the question again. If you have one, put it in the comments there, but if you can, hit that little question mark button. That's the best way to see that. I got a good question there. So someone asked, is there a built-in adjustment layer, or where should we download plugins? So no, there's not a built-in adjustment layer, which I can understand why there's not an adjustment layer, because you can run into some problems with it. However, I do think there should be one. So I've created one that you can go and download. Just go to anawesomeguide.com, and you'll be able to download it right on there. Anawesomeguide.com. If I can get the typing right, let me go and get another window here. There we go. Let's pull it over. So anawesomeguide.com, just click on the downloads button that's on the page here, and you'll see the template right on here that I've created that you can go in and download. It shows you exactly how to install it. There's the video as well on the YouTube player, adding that adjustment layer to Final Cut. And once you have it inside of Final Cut, it shows up under your titles. I believe that's where it's going to show up. And you'll see that adjustment layer in here that you can use and apply right inside of Final Cut. So that's where I've created one that you can use and work with. It's free. There's no cost or anything to it. And it's pretty straightforward. Let me just download it, and we'll just get that going. I've just put it up onto Dropbox here. So when you do get it, you'll see this folder. And that's the folder essentially that you're downloading, right, to get that. This adjustment layer, try to download the entire folder, so the whole zip file. Don't go in and open up this folder, because if you do, you're going to see all these other files in there. Just the first thing that's in there, the Final Cut Pro help.zip, just go over to the right, click the download button, do a direct download from it. Dropbox tries to be helpful by showing you the folders, but there's no need for that. Once it's downloaded, you can hit the little magnifying glass to see it, and just drag this at Final Cut Pro Help folder, drag that into your movies folder, and we're going to put it into that motion templates folder. And again, all on that website where you're going to get this from, it's got all the links, shows you exactly where to put it, and we're essentially just putting it into this titles folder where this one is. I'm just going to replace the old one that's there. And so we'll see here then, titles at Final Cut Pro Help adjustment layer, and then inside of that is the layer itself. It has to be specifically in this path here. And if you have any issues with it, all the help stuff is up on the website. I go through all of the various tips and things that you have to do with the folders there if you need to create them. I get a lot of questions around that, but just if you follow all these tips that are on here, it'll take you right through installing in that and getting it on there. And then if it doesn't show up here, we'll quit and restart Final Cut. Always the good old when in doubt. And then that should show up and be our adjustment layer that we can go and use. So again, this is in the titles and generators sidebar under titles at Final Cut Pro Help. There's our adjustment layer. And the way the adjustment layer works is pretty straightforward. If you've used it somewhere else, just click and drag it down onto your timeline here. You can make the adjustment layer as long or short as you want, depending on what you're trying to adjust. And the way the adjustment layer works is that it adjusts everything that's below it. So if we want to make everything black and white, or we want to make everything smaller, whatever it may be, just apply your changes to this adjustment layer. For example, I'm just going to do a Gaussian blur here and just kind of max it out. But notice how, even though I did not apply that blur to either of these dog pictures or video, it's applied to it while the adjustment layer is on that spot. And once the adjustment layer is finished, it goes back to just seeing what's below it. So yeah, that is the adjustment layer. You can 100% create this with motion yourself. And in the video, I show you how to do that as well. So anawesomeguide.com, just click on the downloads link. It'll take you through all of that. But yeah, I don't know why this isn't just built right in, but you can create it really easily and download it for free on there, and that'll get you all set up. The other question you had was around plugins. Where should you be downloading plugins? I mentioned this in a lot of streams here, but just go and start with the source. Go to apple.com/Final Cut Pro help. /Final Cut Pro. And apple.com/Final Cut Pro. You don't need the hyphens that it puts in. It'll go and redirect to it, but if you want, put in Final-Cut-Pro. On their Final Cut Pro page here, there's a resources tab at the top. Click on resources. Go underneath this little computer, and you'll see there's two links here, Learn More and View Apps on the Mac App Store. You can certainly click on the View Apps on the Mac App Store, and it'll go to a list of the apps, but this is really just, the Final Cut and the Apple apps. You do see some of the extensions down at the bottom here and some of the other apps that are on the App Store. However, this can kind of get you stuck or not get you all the way to what you're actually looking for. These are just the ones that have been submitted to the App Store. So instead of hitting the App Store button, I recommend clicking Learn More instead. When you click Learn More, it goes to this Extend the Power of Final Cut Pro page and gives you all of the categories of the various things you may want to add on to Final Cut. If you're trying to add on effects, go into the effects category. If you're trying to add on more color correction tools, you can do that, or anything else that's on this list. Color correction tends to be a big one, so you can go on and see the various color correction tools that are here. Again, just know that these things are not necessarily free. Some of them are free. For example, you can get DaVinci Resolve. There's a free version of that. There's also a paid version. But just know that these, because they're being kind of promoted almost by Apple on their page, these tend to be vetted apps, and they're a good place to start as opposed to just doing a generic search on the web for Final Cut plugins, which can run you into issues. So that's where I recommend going to get started as far as looking for things there. I see another question on here. How come my slow motion videos from the iPhone imported as normal time and not as slow-mo? Great question there. I should have some slow-mo footage in my project here. Let's see where we have it. And let me just do some search things here. I'll show you what I'm doing, why I'm doing it this way. So I don't know exactly which clip is my slow-mo footage. So in my browser, what I'm going to do is change it to the list view. And on the top here, you have all your different columns, which these are the various parameters, metadata, different things that are attached to your clips here. You can right-click or control-click on any of these columns at the top, and you'll see all of the extra columns you can add. One of these is your video frame rate. And the video frame rate shows up here, and I can click on video frame rate to sort everything by the frame rate that's here, so I can see the various videos. This helps me see which are actually slow-mo clips or not. The reason I did it by frame rate is, notice some of these, let me zoom in so it's a little bit clearer there on Instagram. Some of these are 240 or 60, 2398, 25. These are the various frame rates. So in most cases, a standard project is going to be about 60 frames or less on usually. A lot of them are 30 frames per second. All depends on what kind of footage you're working with and what country you're in. Depends on what it is there. But usually if you have like 120 or 240 or higher, you have a high frame rate that you've recorded your clip with, right? And when you think of the iPhone recording slow-mo video, it's really technically what's happening is it's just recording the video at a higher frame rate. So in this case here, this video, let me do Command 0 again to reset the interface. This clip that I have is just someone doing a backflip into a body of water in the middle of nowhere. But notice this clip in the browser at the top left of it, you have this little circle with the lines on it. That icon, when you see it, same with this clip here, that icon represents some footage that's been shot at a higher frame rate, which usually you're going to use for slow motion footage. So here's a slow motion clip. So I'm going to click and drag this down onto my timeline, put it at the end here. I'm going to hit the Z key, zoom into it just so it's expanded. I'm also going to change the height a little bit so it makes it easier for you guys to see. And then let's hit the space bar and see what this looks like. And it might be hard to see on Instagram, but that video, even though it's quote unquote slow-mo video, it plays back in real time. If you see the little guy in the middle, he's doing the backflip and he's falling at a rate that is real time. It is not slow-mo. That's normal. That's what I would expect to happen inside of Final Cut. How do you make it slow motion? Very easy. Just click on that clip, go to your retime menu, which is this little button here, little clock here. This is our retime menu, and then you can go to slow or fast motion if you want to speed it up. You get your options to slow it down there. Okay. There is one here that says automatic speed as well. If you click on automatic speed, let me zoom into that one again so you get this automatic speed. This is going to look at your video and determine the speed that it should go at based on the frame rate and the project frame rate. So it's going to be doing some math for you, and that'll just slow it down. In this case, it slowed it down to 10%. So now I have my slow motion clip, and if I go over to where you're, let's zoom into it just so you can see the little guy there that I'm referring to. Where is he? There he is. So this is the guy that's going to do the backflip. And so if we play it back, it's going to be slowed down now. Where does he actually jump? There he's going. And get the little red box so you can move up. And if we play it back, audio slowed down. If you're on YouTube, you can hear that. Audio slowed down, video slowed down, everything then is coming to a halt because we use that retime menu. You can use Shift Z to zoom everything to fit. So again, if you have a slow motion clip, we can do here with the hockey game, slow motion clip, drag it down to your timeline. It is going to play in real time. That's normal. Just go to your retime menu and click on automatic speed, or go ahead and just do slow it down to this pace you want it to go at. You can even just hit Command R to show your retime menu right on the timeline there, and then you can drag the bar out just to manually slow it down to a pace that you think works for whatever content that you have. So here we have a face-off, and they're going up towards each other. We can slow that right down. All right, so that was the answer to how come my slow motion videos from the iPhone import as normal time. And the short answer is that's just the way that Final Cut does it really with all footage. And it was recorded in real time, meaning at 100% speed, so it's going to play it back at real time. But because it's a high frame rate, you have all those extra frames in there, so you can slow it down and it should look better. All right. So I think that's all the questions that have come through so far, both on YouTube and on Instagram there. I'll give you another minute. If you got any other questions, go ahead and pop them down there into the chat. Again, as a summary, we did a bunch of voting to find the shortcut of the year. And after all of the votes, it came down to Command B and the spacebar again, like it did last year. And spacebar won it out to get the shortcut of the year there. So that's what I have for you. I see the last question on Instagram. Any best plugins you suggest? No, I don't have any suggestions for plugins. I recommend that you use what's built in. Learn the tools that are built in and included with Final Cut, because there's a ton of stuff that people go out and pay for, and they buy all these extra plugins when you can do almost all of it built right into Final Cut. If you really want to expand the functionality and the plugins that you have built into Final Cut, start with Motion. Motion is a $50 app, which is about the price of many, many plugins that are out there. But start by learning Motion, and then you can customize things and create all of your own plugins yourself and get pretty far from there. Otherwise, go back a little bit in this video on YouTube, youtube.com/FinalCutProHelp. And you can see all of the various resources I direct you to for finding other plugins that are there. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and make sure to hit the subscribe button on YouTube. And if you're watching on Instagram, switch over to YouTube, hit the subscribe button. We have over 200 videos over there that you can watch and learn way more about.